fantastic because we've got Curt Doolittle, the meme machine. He's a living meme. He's a tech entrepreneur. He's sold, I don't know, software and other things to Microsoft. He's probably a secret billionaire. Are you a secret billionaire? I don't know. I don't know.
If I was, I wouldn't say so. It'd just be my ex-wife and she'd send more lawyers after me.
Yeah, that's the thing about being secret. See how he plays this game, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. That's how you play the game. That's how you play the game. I love it.
Create your brand and protect it. You know, I want to be poor and living on a box under a bridge. That means they can't bother me.
And he doesn't know anything about Bitcoin. He has no idea what that's all about. He doesn't get it.
I know nothing.
What's that? I don't know.
No.
Anyway,
yeah. The problem we can have fun talking about Bitcoin sometime. But I only got in on the Bitcoin thing because I was saying, well, it's not money. I mean, let's talk about what it really is. And I was really making just a technical criticism of how they were pitching it. That's all I was really saying. And I should have known.
I love it. So now he doesn't know what Bitcoin is, and he doesn't have any Bitcoin, but he's now. Thank you very much, Curt. It's fascinating to have you on. You're a big name out there. Actually, something I'd like to talk to you about in the future too, in future episodes, would be Bretton Woods. I've seen you post up some very interesting maps about the internal dynamics of the geography of the United States, the Mississippi Basin and stuff, and I being a big geopolitical person, I think those are interesting because that's all about transport costs and the wheat belt and how America is going to be sustained as a power. I'm actually an optimist when it comes to that. I think by posting that, by definition you must be an optimist on America being a powerhouse, right? It's just for you. It's just who is going to control the powerhouse. Is that what it is?
Well, pretty much. I mean, it's either that or it's going to break up because the primary weapon America has going into the future is we have an endless supply of food, and nobody else does, and it's really as simple as that. We have an endless supply of cheap to produce, easy to transport food and coasts to ship it off of, and all we have to do is how do I say this? We have to sanitize our coasts a little bit.
and he's not just talking about Fukushima radiation either. This is Curt Doolittle we're talking about. You got Fukushima radiation on that side. You've got BP oil spill on that side, and you've got Atlantic. I don't know. I can't think of the Atlantic one, but you all know what I'm talking about. All right, so we're gonna rush in.
So don't you have to do some news feed or something?
We're gonna run way over time on this. We're gonna just go on and on forever. They're never gonna get off the show. All right, so we're gonna run into the first news item, and we'll just have a quick banter because these people are irrelevant, right? So Joe Biden, he wants to be the president of the United States. He thinks he can do it. It's Creepy Joe. Tell us about the Democratic field and how. What you think about? Do you think the Dems have a chance at this election? I mean, they're importing voters. They're trying their best.
Well, they're importing voters. They have a chance only because they're importing voters. I mean, if you import enough voters, you're going to get elections. In general, his future depends on where the economy goes, and I thought it would correct about in the middle sometime next year, and I think most people think it's going to. If he can get the Federal Reserve to play along with him to delay that, I think he's still looking pretty good, and he's still looking pretty good because, of course, the Democratic Party has gone hard left, and the public won't take it. So
Bernie Sanders does very, very well on almost all a broad spectrum of polls. He doesn't do very well like with whites and like older whites. Joe Biden beats him out there, but he does okay with he does okay with younger whites, and he doesn't do very
He
well.
does okay with stupid people that are dumb enough to believe him. I mean, it's okay. The problem is he sounds like what he says is possible, and he actually believes it's possible. Whether you could get this president, and he'd be just as powerless as Trump is to fix the borders, so it doesn't make any difference. I mean, I feel like the news media does, which is it's the clown parade right now. And that's really because we've run out of serious people. We've almost run out of the generation of serious people, and it's mostly a clown parade right now. And you see that. I mean, if you took an idea from each one of them, they're pretty good, but in essence, they don't come out and say, well, we would do this by changing this and that. And if they do, it's like Elizabeth Warren did the other day. I mean, it's not going to happen. It can't happen.
Yeah, Elizabeth Warren is pretty extreme. I mean, Pocahontas or whatever you want to call it, but yeah, she's pretty
Nancy
extreme.
Pelosi's a nutcase, and she's still in charge of the freaking. I mean, it doesn't stop you from being not terribly bright and a nutcase if you're really good at playing the political game. Doesn't necessarily mean you fail. Pelosi's a clown, and she's really good at keeping her job.
They thought Pepe was dead, that meme, and then suddenly the clown thing emerged, and bang, he came back to life. So the Pepe lives on, and the clown lives on. Do you think Trump has any challenges from inside the Republican Party? Do you think anyone's going to challenge Trump? Doesn't look that way.
It would be suicidal.
Yeah, for their own career.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he'd kill him. I mean, the guy knows what he's doing when it comes to managing the public conversation. I mean, you can see what the media is doing. The online media is trying to do is they're trying to make sure that he can't do that again this coming election. But not much evidence he's going to be able to. I think what's happened though is that since he can't move on the border situation. It's not his fault. He just can't do it. Since he can't get that done, you have an awful lot of the hard right folks getting frustrated with him.
The YouTube is, well, Google, Project Veritas, all this sort of stuff. It's censoring a whole bunch of stuff. The Michelle Obama is a man. That's all been wiped from YouTube. You can't even access any of it. Like anything InfoWars related, we all know it's all gone. But yeah, they're trying hard. I mean, they've got an ideological bent, and they're the new media in a way. Because people can search through this diversity of content. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what games they play and how they try and rig democracy this time, because they tried last time and it didn't work. But
I'm what my position is. My position is we're going to have a civil war. It doesn't make any difference.
Balkanization.
It's going to happen. Not everybody thinks I'm saying I want to have one. I know I'm saying we're going to have one. I just want to be prepared for it, and so I just think that's what's going to happen. I don't think it really matters what happens. Sometime in the next very short period, it's going to happen, and with this, soon, it just will take Soros to do a little more funding of Antifa at the right time, and for the it was very close during Kavanaugh. It was very close during right after the election. I haven't seen it come terribly close since then, but Trump himself could bring it.
Where is the dividing line? The American Civil War was North versus South. You had a few different issues, including slavery. Where is the line for you? Is it states? Is it people will divide up into their political parties and fight each other? What does the Balkanization look like?
Right now, it looks like city-states versus territories. So we have, immigrant cities, and it's a fairly small number of them that contain, like half the population. And they've been flooding these cities with immigrants, and now they're trying to flood the countryside with them. And so this is, the plan, and they're doing a pretty good job of it. But if you wanted to sort of run the place politically, you would just make the cities that have already by denying federal oversight, so to speak, by denying the Constitution or the federal government's its responsibilities in the Constitution. They've already effectively seceded. All we have to do is identify those cities, and I've written up about this quite a bit. But you just would make those into city states, and the minute that happens, you radically alter the problem. I think that the real issue has to come down to the county or district level, where there's no. I mean, I spent most of my life in Washington State, and the Seattle wacko left wing sort of thing, and then you have the more moderate inland, and then you get to the mountains, which is only that far into Washington State. The rest of it's high desert, right? It's west. It's the west. And so, I mean, those people don't have anything in common with the people on the other side, on the coastal side of the mountains. So, same thing with, lots of people in Oregon. They'd be better off with Idaho. So I don't think the existing state network stays in place at all. I think it's really, if we're going to have a federal government at all, it will have to turn into a complete restructuring of what we call states, into city states and territorial states.
I always thought of it as like France pre-Civil War, Napoleonic era. So France was fighting on all fronts. They had a war against England. They had a war against Prussia, against Italy, against Spain. They were fighting on all these fronts, and they were having a civil war at the same time. And they were fine. They were completely fine. They could absorb all these shocks at the same time. Toulouse, obviously, being the one where Napoleon came in and knocked the British out. But that's what I see America as I see it as in that stage where even if they had a civil war, people say, oh, well, that'd be the end of America. No, it would have a civil war. It would be totally fine. It'd be able to fight countries on its periphery, and sustain adventures abroad, even if there was a civil war. That's my hypothesis, looking from the outside in. Do you think America is big enough to sustain that, or do you think that a civil war would be the end?
Well, it's like I said, if we were able to get power out for 6 months, the country'd never come back. So, I mean, it's just a matter of... Too reliant on technology. Yeah. So, I mean, everybody knows, it's not an uncommon, the Department of Homeland Security knows this, certainly the military does, is that if you wanted to take over the United States, it doesn't take all that much. You just got to basically make it too difficult to restore power and communications. And this is an empire, right? It's a huge amount of territory. And we're not Russians, so we can't just go back to the farm. I mean, a third of Russia still lives without houses, right? I mean, most everybody's got grandparents that still live in the village, and you can go farm, like they did right? We can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
So I mean, three meals away from civil war, and we don't have. We pay a lot of malcontents, subpopulations, to be quiet, so to speak. And what happens if those checks stop coming? So I mean, I don't think it's terribly difficult to create a civil war here. I just don't. I think the whole point is that anybody who's responsible knows that, and so the answer is just simply put together a set of demands that are amenable to enough people that war isn't necessary, and so that's mostly my project is along those lines.
Yeah, we're going to get into your project in the next minute or two. We're almost there. So you think there's two tiers of bread and circuses. There's the main tier of bread and circuses. That's the NASCAR, the NFL, and the other ones. And then you've got another one, which is the welfareism, which is the political one, which is going to encouraging all these people. Because America takes the most immigrants in the world, right? It's like 60. What is it? It's like a huge number. I can't even imagine it.
Well, they're not. We don't take immigrants. We're being invaded. I mean, because we're not a nation, right? We're an empire, and that's quite by design. And if you understand how the global financial system works, it's the idea that they're going to build a United States of Europe. In other words, a centrally managed Europe, and they're going to maintain the centrally managed U.S. and they're going to depopulate both areas. I mean, they're doing that for reasons that are in their self-interest, but it's not going to happen. Nobody's going to put up with it too much longer. I mean, it's not going to happen.
So you're you're known on the internet as Mr. Propertarianism. You're basically the founder, right? Are you the founder of Propertarianism? Mm-hmm. You're the creator. Yeah. You're the ideological engineer. You've devised
a propertarian. A propertarian is a person who reduces all questions of social science to a system of measurement. In other words, something that's measurable, and that measurement is property. Now, so that tends to be the libertarian movement. Libertarian movement can better be thought of as a rule of law movement than a property movement, and so the differences in the different sectors of the libertarian movement are, well, what's the limit of property and what do we do with it? And so I just took it all the way to the nth degree and said, well, it's anything that people demonstrate as property. I just took the empirical approach and what they'll defend, and I'm not going to get into the whole logic of it right now, but I just took it to its logical end and said that let's just treat this as a social science and let's formalize it as social science. And so that's mostly what I started with. And then once I started with that program, I ended up with, strictly constructed law, or strictly constructed tort law, which is strictly constructed property law, which is what our Constitution in America was at least sort of, it was in the direction of, and because that's the Anglo-Saxon tradition. But I've sort of taken our Constitution and taken it from where it is today to where, the strict constitutionalists desire it to be, which is a strictly constructed system of formal logic that is not open to interpretation.
John, Mr. John, I just got to get his name back here. What is it? John Mark. Yeah, John Mark has done some incredible work on this. He's done some really good stuff. But he used a very interesting example to explain this new property right that you're talking about. And he said, for example, he took the example of a street and the fact that the safety that comes from the street, say it was a white street with all white people, it feels safe. It is safe for your children, you and your children, and actually you all collectively as a collective own that feeling of safety and security. Now, if somebody inhibits that safety and security and they start driving up and down,
from you.
It's theft. Expand on that. Yes. That's very cool. And
so, there's the basic logic of it. There's how to construct that kind of law. There's, and pretty much every legal question you can think of, moral questions, legal questions, everything, we've got an answer to. We've just made a body of law. And then the Constitution that, would operate the United States, or the Constitution, I say, was really a set of amendments that would update the current Constitution to this condition, the strictly constructed condition, would make it so that we didn't have the ability to circumvent the legislature through the courts the way we've done in this century, or the way the left has strategically undermined it, because the problem is these things aren't in our Constitution. They aren't defined strictly. They're defined that if they're defined at all, they're not defined strictly. So you have to have the notion of the English common law, the Anglo-Saxon common law, Germanic common law before that, and Western Indo-European law before that. You have to know that sequence to understand what the law means as a tradition and what that means. And well, we used to be educated in these things, but the Marxists in particular and the postmodernists, they've sought every opportunity to deprive our people of the education about what that means, to undermine that rule of law, to reframe what those words mean, and they've systematically used the education and propaganda system to, the media, to make our people ignorant of that tradition and what it means. So they've come very close to their second. They destroyed the Roman Empire pretty much by this means, and they're coming and destroying the Western civilization by the second time using the same means. And they're even just like they went through and smashed the noses of statues of the Roman Empire, and they're tearing down our statues here in the United States. So it's the exact same program, and it's using the exact same script. The problem is our people don't know that, and so they're vulnerable to it.
Do you because I notice in propertarianism you talk about American exceptionalism. Is what do you think of the Magna Carta? Because you're interested in law. Is the Magna Carta important to you, or is it not a very important instrument?
Sure, the entire chain of Western law is important. The significant difference between Anglo law and Continental law, which is Roman, French, and then from French, German, is that Continental law is constrained beforehand, so we limit conflict, and Anglo law is common law, so there's no prior constraint, and very limited prior constraint, and you can work it out in court afterwards. So, in other words, it's a very risk tolerant system of law, which is why you see the stock market in New York, all the technological advancement happening in the United States. You have the bond market in the UK. You have heavy industry in Germany, and you have military production in Russia. Well, why is that? Because those are the things that each culture's legal system can tolerate, and so we have the most you're allowed to fail system here in the States. Matter of fact, I think people from other parts of the world just can't imagine this. But I was like, if you haven't gone bankrupt as an entrepreneur, you haven't tried anything good enough yet. It's not a failure isn't a crime here. You're supposed to fail 3 times and then succeed, to be the underdog. So it's just a very different way of thinking about the world, and our legal system loves that.
That's great. In Australia, that's entrepreneurship is shunned upon. They hate it. It sucks. It's so bad because we get all this brain drain from Australia because they look down on them because they've had a few lucky things with a few big industries, so they made a lot of money, and they've shunned all this other stuff away, and it's disgusting. Why do you think the West is important? Why do you think it's worth defending? Isn't it doesn't it always just degenerate into some sort of yucky mess of Weimar 2.0, 3.0, or is it what's so important about it?
Well, we developed combined the horse wheel and bronze. We took over or killed everything between Spain and the Chinese border, and we created the language that most people go from, but we didn't think about it that way. We didn't think about what was important about our civilization or language, and we didn't understand that religion was the means by which religion was the counter-revolution against that. We had the Bronze Age collapse, which could have been our people, we have no idea. And that lasted for 600 years, and then we built the ancient world. And in the ancient world, by the time we got into the height of the Roman Empire, we were coming very close to the Industrial Revolution. By the time we get to the Antikythera device, you can see that we're pretty much there. It's right there. We don't recover from the Abrahamic Dark Age of Judaism to undermine, Christianity to weaken, and Islam to conquer. We didn't come out of that for over 1,000 years. To some degree, we're still escaping from it. So, yet in less than 1,000 years, far less than 1,000 years in the ancient world, and roughly 500, and 500 in the modern world, we dragged humanity kicking and screaming against their will out of superstition and ignorance, poverty, starvation, hard labor, child mortality, early death, suffering, disease, and the vicissitudes of nature. Who the hell else did that? We did, these other people want to claim little things like I'll go through every discovery that you talk about between the different cultures. Like, why did the Greeks deal with geometry, and why did it take us, once we got infected by the algebra the way the Babylonians did it, why did it take us till Descartes to figure out that we actually could do the same thing in geometry? Yet they didn't. Well, there's a reason, because we did geometry because we built things, and they did algebra so they could do astrology. Now, what's the difference between building things and astrology? You think these things are small, but they have profound consequences. I mean, algebra in its sense is just language, whereas geometry is measurement. It's real and supernatural or surreal. And these are exaggerated points, but it's so good to bring up because it illustrates how hard it is for civilizations to get out of subtle problems. So what's the uniqueness of the West? Very long time ago, we started out as cattle raiders and entrepreneurs. In other words, you and I got together with a bunch of our families because bronze, horse, and chariot are expensive, and we went out and stole other guys' cattle. Just like pirates got together and built a pirate. Well, it's an entrepreneurial activity, so it's a contract. It's a contractual order. Then when we came back, we took those horses out across the European plain. Well, the European plain isn't like the great river valleys of the Nile, the Tigris Euphrates, the Indus River Valley, or the Yellow River, where you can take a high degree of productivity in a small space and therefore use force to organize and extract taxes from it and create a professional army. Well, we couldn't do that. We had to maintain our entrepreneurship in Europe. And so we couldn't afford standard armies. So what did we have? We had militias instead. If we had to have an army, it was you and me. Well, what did that mean? It means you and I own everything, right? We own the society. The aristocracy owns the society. So this is where our common law comes from. Now the interesting thing about this common law is that it applies to the kings, right? I mean, the common law applies to the kings, the traditional law applies to the kings, and it's just property rights is all this law is. Well, to make it worse, what do you do? How did problems get solved? Well, because we're all, relatively equal under this law, we have juries. So what happened in our world is power could never be concentrated until very late in the late ages, in the late Middle Ages, early modern era. I mean, arguably Napoleon is the destroyer of Western civilization because he restores the conquest of the Roman Empire. In other words, the ritual of conquest that the Roman Empire did. But it took us that long to Napoleon to get back there. But what did we do differently? We did geometry, we did jury, and we did truth-telling. Well, what do we do in the West that's different in our truth-telling? Well, we tell the truth before faced, or truth regardless of cost, the dominance or competence hierarchy. We speak truth to power. We're always supposed to do that. It happened in our juries. It still happens. We're the only people that tell the truth. And so you don't understand, what people don't understand is what happened. Well, you got this truth-telling, you got reporting. Since people aren't in this monolithic hierarchy that they are in the river civilizations, you develop these families that are powerful. They have to negotiate, just like entrepreneurs have to negotiate. So there turns up to be this division of power. You have even the priesthood is below the head families. So you end up with these the only way to solve problems is markets. So what did we do? We produced tort law, markets, and everything, truth-telling, and out of that debate and that structure became reason became empiricism became science became technology became prosperity. And so there's a really profound specialness to the uniqueness of Western civilizations. We're the people that invented truth in the sense that we mean it scientifically. In other words, it's truth regardless of our status, regardless of our condition. And yes, if you kill the rich guy, you have to pay more fees than if you kill the slave. But in general, the law applies to everybody. So this telling of truth is what got us our advantage in every world and these markets and our legal system. Those things all work together, and I'm doing this off the top of my head. It's a little bit sloppy job of it, but if you think about it, what is the fastest way human societies can evolve? Well, they can run as markets rather than monopolies. They can use tort law rather than legislation. They can use competing institutions rather than monolithic institutions. And what will happen is they can simply adapt faster than every other civilization on Earth. So that's really our thing, is we learned the OODA loop I don't know if you know what that is. It's the outwit and outmaneuver loop. Get inside your enemy's decision structure. We learned that 5,000 years ago, and we've built it into a civilizational structure. It's just we adapt faster, and we pay the high price of social cost, personal ego cost, familial cost, status cost, and no one else does. I mean, go to most of the world. Does face come first or truth come first? Does family come first or does commons come first? Whereas, what do we do differently? We produce commons. Who else can produce commons like we have in Europe? Who else has them? If you go to China today, what happens if somebody gets run over in the street?
They leave them there.
They leave them there. Now, if you, I love Russians. So I'm a Russophile, but
same.
So I always love Russia because if you get out of line there, you get hit in the face really fast. I just really like it. It's very clear. People are good manners because if you don't get, you get hit.
It's very direct. At least you know what they're saying. You piss me off.
Behave in public. And people behave, they're nice, they're poor, but they behave. And so, but when the guy knocks you out, he'll drag you to the side of the street, put you on your side so you don't choke, pat you on the back again, make sure you're okay before he leaves. I mean, that's how they do things, And us, we stand around there. It's like do I get to be hero today? I want to go home and tell people I was a hero. Like if there's anything wrong, we're in there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? If we get the chance to, there's a great set of studies about when you go to explain a traffic ticket, right? Will Americans tell the truth or not? Will Canadians tell the truth or not? Well, the truth is, it goes from like Americans down to Germans, and after that, it's a cliff, right? There's nobody else who tells the truth. There's nobody else. And so, Americans, we're just utopian, right? We're like, yes, I'm heroic. I was wrong, But, after Germany, everybody else just lies like a rug. And then, you get down to the Arab world, and lying is heroic. Right? Braggadocio lying. And, you defend people whether they're right or wrong, right? You don't, they're just family or friends. You just get into the mall. You don't, question it. So, so really what happens is by the fact that we have developed this very uniquely high trust society is an extremely expensive cost for all of us to pay. You and I we pay enormous taxes that no one else in the world does to create this high trust society, and no one else can do it. And the people who come here don't do it. So this is the problem we face, is that we're unnatural. And our unnaturalness has been extremely valuable for mankind. And the problem is I don't see any way of reproducing it, because it certainly looks to me like every culture doesn't really change. It maintains those systems over thousands of years.
And it's always the high trust culture that's the most easy to take advantage of, because that's its weakness by definition. I think there was a good poet, and he wrote, I should find the poem one day, but I'll get back to you on that one. It's a very good poem. I shouldn't distort it with my own thoughts. I was just going to say, so empiricism is key, right? And that means truth, whether people like it, whether they don't like it, or what. So in terms of politicians, when they get on the stage and they have a chat with the audience and with the people, and they're making promises, tell us about empiricism and what comes out of a politician's mouth.
Oh, there's more than one problem there. The people don't want to hear the truth. If the politician tells the truth, they won't be elected. And if the people understood the truth, they would hate it. So you have this problem, and if you've ever talked on stage, the problem is you can't, even I'm talking to you now. I just went over a long spiel about the uniqueness of Western civilization, and it's really, what I talked about was really important. But to do that verbally with almost anybody that isn't sitting there interested like you are, mean, you lose them because most people can go 1 or 2 points. They can't do 3 or 4 or 5 points and maybe 6, 3 or 4 or 5 more, and then see how those pieces fit together. I mean, you have to teach them these things incrementally. Now, if I do it in writing, I make that argument all the time. In writing, it's one thing because they can go through at their own pace, one step at a time, whatever. And so our tolerance for precision in writing is higher, right? We have more tolerance for that. So, you can make that argument there. But, those politicians faced with the same thing. They can't say the truth, and if they say the truth, the people won't vote for them. And even if they would vote for them, they'd hate what it was they were saying. I mean, the mastery of the politician is to speak in moral terms about things that are completely amoral. In other words, running a country is a purely empirical task. The reason China fell behind is they switched from governing empirically and they began to govern morally. Well, morally it basically means you aren't measuring anymore. You're just guessing, right? So that's what it means. I mean, because you can say I can make a moral decision, but can I empirically do anything about it? But the question is, if you're no longer managing empirically, you don't really know what's going on. Well, in our case, we're in a situation where we ran a couple of experiments beginning of the 20th century, the Federal Reserve being one of them, open democracy being another, and the involuntary one, which was pushed upon us by the Immigration Act, and which was abandoning our selectiveness in who was immigrating to maintain the middle class society. We've run all those, and it turns out that those have all run their course, and they're not doing very well. The other thing we thought was that the Constitution was durable enough. Well, it's not. We thought that the Academy couldn't be taken over. It could be. So we thought a lot of things were very durable institutions that are not. Our institutions weren't durable. They were habits. So one of all I've tried to do is say, how do I take all those institutions and turn them from habits to law so that they're durable?
Interesting. So I know I might be able to hazard a guess of what you might say here, but Ron Paul, he's known as the truth guy, and he told truths that people didn't like, and he was very popular. He came close-ish to Mitt Romney in the primary. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What do you say of Ron Paul? Do you say that guy was the experiment of this, and also he ran close to the Constitution? Ron Paul.
Well, Ron Paul ran into the vector of the crossing the border of the immigrant population. And so in other words, there was a demographic change at that very end, and that's why you see there's this stuff going around today, which is showing how the left developed an entirely new language for hating white people under Obama, and you can see that all being developed. You can see it in the data. I mean, I copied it all down because I think the guy got banned from Twitter for sharing it.
No.
But the second thing was that Ron Paul he's actually wrong about fiat money. He's wrong about that, and that's a long conversation. And he was wrong about the empire. In other words, we shouldn't be out venturing, doing adventuresome activities. In other words, trying to be a policeman. But on the other hand, Americans are going to get a taste very soon of what it's like when the American dollar is no longer a reserve currency or used to buy, or is the primary vehicle for buying oil, and they're going to be reduced to the same level of income as Europeans. So Europeans are a lot like us, except they're a lot poorer. Well, we're going to be a lot poorer when that happens. So I mean, well, you can bitch about the military all you want. It's actually the cheapest, highest return investment we can make because we control the world pattern of law, trade, and finance, which means there's demand for our currency, which means every American lives above his natural standard. So, Ron was wrong about a bunch of things. What he was right about was speak the truth. And that was beautiful. But we needed that to happen earlier, and it was too late.
Even though
honestly, we would have won. We would have won the war against liberals if not for immigration. It's really clear we would have won the we won the war against Marxism. We would have won we won the war against economic Marxism. We won the war against social democracy. We won the war against postmodernism with science. In other words, it's finishing up now. I mean, the racial diversity argument will be closed down. So I mean, it'll take us a while to work through that, but that data's there. So the only thing that stopped us from restoring Western civilization was immigration. We would have had it because those things would have run their course. But they were really good about bringing in as many third worlders as possible and taxing our middle class into reproductive rates that were below subsistence.
Let's talk about birth rates. So birth rates across the Western world are falling massively. They're below the fertility level is probably the lowest it's ever been. There's a correlation between wealth and fertility. Fertility falls as wealth goes up. How do you restore fertility rates in European, American, and other Western countries? What's the prescription?
You wanna? I'm going to tell you give you an uncommon answer. I'm not sure it's. We have to. The real reason is people want to have more kids they can't afford to. Right? Why can't they afford to? Because taxes. Every dollar that we've obtained from women entering the workforce has been consumed in taxes. In other words, we're not. That it's done no good. All they do is take that money now and redistribute it. So we're actually redistributing not only money but reproduction. And we're redistributing it in the worst possible way. So I mean, that's why our IQ is. I mean, it's 99 now, and it's going to hit 97. At 97 is when the cliff effect starts to kick in.
It's like a cascading effect after that time.
It's really terrible after 97. You want it to be 105. We probably got up in the late, in just before the Victorian era, as close to 112. At least in the UK, we did. We had an incredible population there, but you can't. I mean, I've talked to Lynn about this. Quite a bit.
Douglas Murray, just on the IQ thing, we'll go back to birth rates in a second. On the IQ thing, Douglas Murray argues in his book Death of the West, he argues that because of the campus college effect in the United States, it's what happens is you get a high IQ woman and a high IQ man, and then they meet at college, they make a lot of money, they have a child, they invest a lot in that child, and then they send that child back to that university, and there becomes an elite pool of high IQ, high wealth individuals, and everybody else gets left out of the system. Do you think that there is a tier system in the IQ wealth?
Well, there's
stratification.
There's some of that. What it really is doing is draining the middle class regions of the country. So yeah, it's the cities are ovary graveyards, right? I mean, an urban city is an ovary graveyard, and that's because of urban regulation. I mean, in Germany they didn't do that, but they still have a similar problem. But yeah, you're right. It's developing into a caste system because people used to get married for a variety of reasons because their range of activity wasn't very high. But although if you look at it, people tend to marry within their class pretty consistently throughout history. So I'm not sure it isn't always happening. I think the issue isn't that we're forming castes so much as that the people who are best are not producing children, where in the past the people who are best were producing children. And so, it's just that we're having China is starting to have this problem now. Is that they're going to they have an advantage, but China's specifically wonderful because they don't seem to pay the rural tax on IQ, what the rest of us do. In other words, their rural people don't seem to be as low to start with. So there's a little less of a Flynn effect over there. He was trusting Chinese data being what it is. That's what it appears. But anyway, China is going to drop below 100 relatively quickly. We're in sort of free fall now because of immigration. But the answer I wanted to give you that's relatively uncommon is that I think we probably have 100 million too many people in United States right now for what I suspect the next century is going to bring about. So I'm not sure that having a low reproductive rate right now is a bad idea, as much as I am saying that everybody that's come here since 65, who is not a skilled professional, so to speak, is a serious drain on the people, just like the people they're bringing in from the hinterlands into Europe are doing the same damage to Europe. I mean, the future problem is pretty obvious. I mean, we have the pollution issue, but we also, I'm not a global warming person, but we have many global issues that are really nothing more than population. And if we want to continue consuming energy at the quality of life we have problems.
So your arguments are all tending towards quality over quantity. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what's called aristocracy. You either are a pack of aristocrats or you're a herd of peasants. I mean, which one do you want to be? I mean, history isn't kind. It says that Western new civilization has been eugenic since our origins.
But we live in the age of equality. That means everybody gets a say, right?
We live in a wonderful period where we have been able to make use of of the technological benefit of hydrocarbons. That's what we live in. We live in a wonderful world with free energy, and that's going to last us a little while longer. God knows how long, but it'll last us another couple hundred years. So we live in that age, and we're trying to spend as much as we can to do it, and everybody's trying to get very healthy and rich. But I mean, the truth is that once you've got, your apartment, with 3-bedroom apartment for you and your kids, and the washer, dishwasher, whatever. I mean, at some point, which is most points, you're just consuming virtue signals. In other words, we're not really, that's all you're consuming is an attempt to show you have higher status than someone else. One of the things I learned in the post-Soviet era is they killed that pretty hard. And I'm pretty sure life is better that way. So we're all running around, and it's something I've noticed since I've sort of retired, is that I'm not running around trying to show that my intellectual dick is bigger than everyone else's, or my CEO capacity is better. I just don't care anymore. And I found that the way they live in Europe is much closer to that. And frankly, I think people are happier that way. So as far as I can tell, we're just doing an awful lot of work. I mean, take, for example, a white family today, they can't go just live poor. In other words, without being around bad people. It used to be that if you wanted to, go live, in a rural community, and you wanted to buy a $50,000 house, like you can buy a $100,000 house in Pennsylvania, but they're taxed like the people who live in the city. And you can't be, we have all these impediments to living poor. But make it worse now, you can't segregate yourself from people by class or color or anything. So we can't go have ordinary people. So we're losing our lower classes to ghetto behavior, and this is continuing. So I think aristocratically. I don't think about let's just make as many people as we can. I don't understand the point of that. I can't understand it, but why everyone has the right to have. I don't understand why you think you have that right. I mean, if it's imposing costs upon others, I don't understand that. So
yeah,
I'm prattling along here.
No,
not a very organized fashion.
So do you think it's a symptom of empire? Because because you mentioned that America and Europe seem to be in different stages, and remember that Europe is post many empires. I mean, so if you're looking into Europe, you're looking at the shadow of post a million
I
empires.
tend not to rationalize that stuff. Don't think too hard. Incentives are incentives. I mean, what's happening today is a product of the post-war era. It's a little bit product of Marxism, but largely a product of the post-war era. A lot of product of the collapse of the British Empire and the broader European civilization. But our problems today are largely to do with very simple, very local things, which are created by normal incentives by having the United States act as world policemen.
How much of our problems are psychological, and how much of them are real?
Can you try that again on me?
So a lot of people say, like Jonathan Bowden, for example, a hard right guy in the UK. He's passed away now, but he argued that it's the guilt mechanism. So every time white Europeans try and stand up for themselves, they run into all these roadblocks. It's not actually a problem if we feel strong in the majority and we advocate for policies, because we can do all the things we want to do. But mostly it's psychological roadblocks that are impediments to our white Europeans' progress. Do you think, or do you think that the reality, so that in America you actually have laws and structures and physical impediments to progress? Is it psychological, or is it real, or is it mixed of the two things? Because I know in Australia, for example, it's all psychological. It's all psychological. Every bit of it is psychological games.
Well, that's a really long conversation. For what you mean, yeah, there are real incentives and institutions set up that are producing the consequences that we live under, and it's by design, right? So if you say it's all psychological, I'm going to say no. It's a combination of, by design, producing the incentives and the information that feed that. Most of it's just consumption. In other words, everybody's trying to make a buck. The people at the top are trying to make a buck all the way down. The people in government are trying to stand power. So I would say I tend to reduce it to incentives. In the sense that you mean it, are people ill-informed? Are they uneducated? Is a Christian value easy to misplace? Is our vision of ourselves in the world easy to take advantage of? Well, yes. I mean, we're the least racist people on the planet, except that we're the biggest racists. We're the least clannish people, except that we're the most racist. We're the most selfish people on the planet, except the most charitable. You know what I mean? We're the people who did the most evil, except that as far as I can tell, we've done the most good. I look at this and I'm like, well, it's just the art of conquest of the Roman Empire by gossiping, shaming, rallying, and moralizing, creating a false history, a false promise, and then backing it up with pseudoscience, denial, and sophism. And where does that come from? It comes from monotheistic Abrahamic religion. It was spread that way. It's argued that way, and that's the problem. Is our people are vulnerable to it because we have the high trust society. You can't pull this stuff over on Russians. You can't pull it over on Poles, right? Why can you pull it over on us? Well, because we're trusting and because we have all these habits. Now, the problem is, what most people will say is, and this is what I expect most people to say is, well, I want to change our psychology. Well, I don't. I want to change the law so that we have an incentive to every time one of those people gets involved in one of these things that takes advantage of us, we crucify him. And I want to create a market for the continuous, relentless persecution of people who try to do this to our people and preserve our high trust society. And so we were intentionally deprived of our right to defend the commons in court by the state under English common law during the early Industrial Revolution. But through most of our history, we could go to the court or the king and appeal for justice because of defense of the commons, or we could take up arms and go defend it ourselves. Well, I want to restore both of those things. I want to restore the universally military participation, in the sense that there's a militia, that we all have responsibilities for the defense in the Swiss model, and for emergency services and these things. So we all have the ownership of the commons. But I also want to restore the market for the prosecution of evil. And these people who get up there, and I want to make it is a serious crime for a politician to get up there and say something's possible it's not, promise something that it isn't, and tell us something that isn't true. Well, there's certain things you can't tell are true, especially military and state secrets. I mean, those things are not whatever, but they're not policy situations. In other words, I'm buying your vote. So, I mean, telling people that socialism is possible, these things they're not possible. I mean, I was even in a room Sunday. So it was some
without the side effects of mass starvation, for example.
Starvation, or the fact that everybody of talent leaves. I mean, look at Ireland and Lebanon and Ukraine. I mean, look at what's happening to your country. IQ flies.
Yeah, we got about 5 minutes left on the clock, and I want to ask you a fairly big question to end on. Your argument is that there's a second conquest of the West underway. Can you just quickly tell us, is there a second conquest of the West, and who's doing it, what, when, where, why, how, if you can?
Well, everybody knows who's doing it. It's the alliance between the large family, the old families of Europe, and certain banking cartel we all know about, right? And certain group that favors that banking cartel, and it's being done quite deliberately. It's been, I don't know why. I mean, it's common universal knowledge. The fact that people don't understand how it's done is just what it is. But there's no reason it has to be done. That it has to continue. Matter of fact, money isn't money anymore. Certainly since the 70s, we haven't needed to have any of these people around any longer. And my argument is, I can eliminate all consumer interest altogether and make them go away, and take all that money and retain it in our people. Now, if you think that you think you're wealthy today, what would happen if all your interest payments went away?
Imagine a world without debt. That's the logo of this.
Well, imagine a world without interest, at least. I mean, debt's fine. If you're not making use of debt, you're not...
I should change it to usury or something.
Yeah,
wherever it is.
Well, okay. So everybody knows what's going on, and I think, at least I know how to fix it. Some other people, we all have ideas how to fix it. Everybody else wants to do a half job, and I'm like, we're going to have a change. Let's have a change. Let's fix the problem permanently, and let's put it in law. Let's not just band-aid it so the evil creepy people around the world can just manage to restore it again in another 50 years.
So you want codified, because that's the thing about the Constitution, the Magna Carta. They're laws in themselves, but you want codified solutions to protecting the laws.
I want it to look like think of it this way. It's not finished yet, but it's getting there. If you had to write a software program to run the law, in other words, a software program has to compile, definitions are clear, there's no fuzzy language in there, grammar and syntax is turns out you can do that in law. I mean, you might think it's crazy, but I've been doing this a long time, and you can. So it's possible to write law like that, and it's possible to create a constitution that produces institutions like that. So to me, it's been a long life's work, but I want to create it so that this, not only do we fix it, but it's not open to discussion anymore. And we, not only is it on discussion, but discussing it, we're almost done, but discussing it is illegal. In other words, even talking about it opens you up for attempted fraud.
Would you be happy and open for an AI to assist you in writing these laws, or do you want humans who know the problem specifically to do all the work?
I don't know why I wouldn't want an AI. I have 5 minutes. Sorry, I'm distracted by someone here.
That's all right.
So Ask me the question. So the problem is that would I be...
Would you be happy for an AI to help you, assist you writing these laws?
An AI is okay in the sense that it can. The problem is that the reason you and I can cooperate is because we can empathize with each other and we can investigate each other's minds. Getting an AI to do that is quite difficult. Getting AI, for example, we have applications today that check proofs. In other words, they go through mathematical arguments and they see if they survive testing. I can see computers doing that. Whether they can author it or not, I have a hard time seeing that. I think we're a very long way from getting computers that can author law.
All right, so we've run out of time. Hey, thank you very much, Curt Doolittle, for coming on. If there's anything else you would like to say, just quickly say it now.
Oh, thank you for having me on. I wish I had. I wish I wasn't so tired and I was a little better at articulating my ideas in an organized fashion. But thanks for having me on.
No, we'll have you on again, and thank you very much. So everyone go check out the Unshackled.net and all new episodes of Detonation coming up this week. Curt Doolittle, he's Propertarianism. Check him out. Fascinating guy. Thank you very much, Curt Doolittle.
Take care, boss.
Thank you.